When you think about a sword fight, what really comes to mind? Is it that big, chaotic scene from a movie? Blades clanging everywhere, people jumping over tables? Oh, that's the stuff of Hollywood. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We're diving deep into the old manuals, the actual treatises, to uncover a lost art. One that was less about wild brawling and way more about a deadly, calculated science. So let's just get right to it. How did people actually fight with swords when their life was on the line? As you've probably already guessed, the movie version, it's not the whole story. Not by a long shot. The reality was something far more disciplined, way more intelligent, and honestly, just a lot more fascinating. Okay, here's the core idea. For the fencing masters back in the Renaissance and for centuries after, sword fighting was a seriously sophisticated science. All across Europe, Italy, Spain, France, England, these masters were writing everything down. They created this massive library of work all based on, and I'm quoting a historian here, fixed principles well defined. This wasn't just swinging a sharp piece of metal, it was a system. And that system, it was really built on three main pillars. First, you have the cold, hard geometry of a fight, basically how you control space. Second, there's the critical element of timing, which the masters called tempo. And finally, you have the psychological duel, the real chess match of trying to outwit your opponent. So let's start with that first pillar, geometry. Because before a single blade even touched another, the most fundamental battle was all about controlling space. Everything, and I mean everything, hinged on this. The absolute cornerstone of this whole science is a concept called misura. It's an Italian word, and it just means measure or distance. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's that perfect critical distance between you and your opponent. If you're too far away, your attack is useless. But if you're too close, well, you can get hit just as easily as you can hit them. So a fencer's number one job was to find that sweet spot, control it, and then manipulate it. Okay, so you found your misura. Now what? How do you attack? Well, it's not with some big, wild swing. The masters taught that the thrust had to travel down the linea perfecta, the perfect line. And this concept is just beautiful in its simplicity. I mean, think about it. A straight line is the shortest and therefore the fastest path to any target. By extending your sword down this line, you're not only striking as fast as possible, you're also creating a physical barrier that protects your own body as you move in. And this image right here shows you exactly what that looks like. This one's from a French manual, but the idea was totally universal. Just look at the fencer on the left. See how his body is perfectly aligned, his arm is straight, and that sword is just driving directly at his opponent's chest? That is not just a lunge. It's applied geometry, designed for pure speed and safety. All right, let's move on to the second pillar, because this is where it gets even cooler. We've talked about the geometry of space, but just as important, maybe even more so, was the mastery of time. The masters called this tempo, and they treated it with this almost philosophical reverence. Just listen to this quote from the Italian master Paolo Bertelli. He really gets to the heart of it. See, tempo wasn't just about being quick. He calls it an act of the intellect, a delicate point where your mind decides the absolute perfect moment to act. It's what he considered the soul of fencing, turning it from just a physical thing into a battle of minds. So what is tempo? At its core, it's the art of grabbing that one perfect moment. It's about recognizing that tiny window when your opponent is vulnerable. Maybe they're shifting their weight or just starting their own attack. A master of tempo doesn't just react. They feel the rhythm of the fight, they anticipate, and they strike in that single, fleeting instant when an opening appears. Which, of course, brings us to a really important question. What happens if your opponent is good? What if they're skilled and they never just give you that perfect opening? Well, then you have to create one. And this is where we get into our third pillar, the psychological chess match, the art of deception. Now, this brings up a really fascinating debate that an English master named George Silver pointed out. He saw this paradox. You could have an unskilled brawler who just rushes in with pure courage and force, and then you have the scientific fencer who stands back patiently, waiting to use the techniques his schoolmaster taught him. Silver argued that sometimes that raw, aggressive fighter could actually win just by refusing to play the scientific game. which meant the skilled fencer had to be more than just a technician. They had to be a master of deception. So to force an opening, to make one appear, the masters had a whole bag of tricks. They used feints, which are false attacks to make the opponent react and open up a new target. They practiced causione, the subtle little flick of the wrist to get around the other guy's blade. They mastered the incredibly bold contratempo, which is hitting your enemy right as they're starting their attack. And they used guadagni, gains on the blade, to overpower their opponent's weapon and create an opening through pure leverage. So you've got these three pillars: geometry, timing, and psychology. And together, they formed a science of combat that wasn't frozen in time. No way. It evolved over hundreds of years, passed from master to student, moving from the dueling grounds of the Renaissance all the way to the Olympic strips we see today. You can literally trace a clear line through the centuries. The science grew from these huge comprehensive systems of early masters like Morozzo to the deadly, efficient rapier fencing perfected by Fabrice, through the super elegant small sword style of Angelo's famous school in London, all the way to the foundations of modern sports saber laid down by Radielli. It's an unbroken chain. And what's amazing is that through all of that change, all of that evolution, the core ideas we've been talking about have stayed exactly the same. It proves that whether you're holding a Renaissance rapier or a modern Olympic épée, winning still comes down to controlling the misura, seizing the tempo, and winning that psychological battle. The weapons change, but the science endures. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. You know, in our world today, with all the constant digital distractions, what can we take away from an art that for centuries demanded absolute total focus and presence of mind? An art where a single slip in attention, one missed tempo, could be the difference between life and death. It's a pretty powerful question, isn't it?